Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Candice. Today we are going to talk about like modern day idolatry. Not in the way that you would think necessarily. And I'm also going to tie in an update on my low tech march towards the end of this, if I remember. Alright, before we get started though, we're going to pray for this video and then dive right in. God, thank you so much for always being there for us, for referencing yourself in the Bible so many times as our spouse, as, our father, as the one who wants to protect for us and provide for us and take care of us. I ask that you would send anyone you would like to this video and that these would be your words, not mine. I ask these things in Jesus Christ's name. Okay, heads up, you guys might be able to hear the sound. A neighbor is taking care of a tree, and it's a little noisy. We're in the space that's the farthest away from it, so hopefully the noise isn't obnoxious for you guys, but I can definitely hear it. I'm sitting here, so you guys probably can too. We'll excuse that and just kind of roll with it. I did not plan on having a neighbor take care of a tree today, but things happen. Okay, so when talking about idolatry, idols, right? I think a lot of the times our minds as Christians kind of jump back to the Old Testament, right? When Israel was going after the idols, which were like the heathen gods, if you will, of the nations around them. So it was basically, pagan gods is what we usually associate idols with, right? But technically, pretty much, an idol is anything that we put in the place of God in our hearts. So an idol could be a lot of different things, right? Some examples of idols. Money, or a sense of financial security and well-being. A career or a job can turn into an idol if it takes the place of God in your heart. Relationships, marriages, spouses, children, or future spouses, future children, right? Entertainment things can turn into idols. Stop trying to eat the cord. Books, movies, your phone, the television, computer games, internet scrolling, social media, your image can be an idol. If it's your image online or your image in person and trying to make it perfect, your home and your possessions can become idols. Also, things like unrealistic expectations, perfectionism, right? Focusing on how things need to be perfect all the time and like just having that play in your mind instead of spending time with God. That can be an idol. Ideas, like an idea of, well, if my spouse would do this, our marriage would be perfect and then I would be happy. Or, trying to think about the perfect job, or busying yourself so much that you fill your schedule so much with so much stuff that you don't have time for God. Productivity, stuff like that. All of these things can be idols. They're not technically idols in and of themselves, right? But it's where we put them in our hearts in the order that can turn them into an idol. God is supposed to be up at the top, right? And anything that kind of slips in above him is an idol. And any of these things can slip in above him if we let them. Now, do we usually go around in our day-to-day lives and determine that, yes, I am deliberately going to put this thing above God in my life? No, of course not. Most of us don't do that. But what happens usually, right, is we get stressed out. We are dealing with some sort of trauma or some sort of issue, and we don't really want to address it. Or there's something happening in our marriage or in our family or in that relationship that's irritating us or stressing us out, and we don't know how to deal with it. And so what we do is we take all those stressing things, right, and then we divert our attentions into something that helps us escape from those things, right? Our escape tends to be things that ultimately slip those things up above God's place in our hearts. So if when we're stressed out we watch television, and this becomes a habit, and it becomes a habit that's so prevalent that it takes over the time that we would have spent with God for the day, then it's slipping above it, and then it becomes an idol in that way. Usually we don't do this, we don't go into this with the intentionality of being like, okay, I'm going to put my phone above God today. It's just something that kind of happens. And I think it's something that we need to be aware of, because, our relationship with God, the way he describes it in the Bible, he references himself as our spouse, right? He says, thy maker is thy husband. He references himself as a husband to us, right? And he wants to spend time with us. He wants to get to know us. He wants us to get to know him. So if you think about it this way, okay, if you're married, right, and your spouse, instead of coming to you and talking about what's stressing them out, or confiding in you about this thing that's bothering them with this person, or this insecurity that they have, or this trauma from a long time ago that they haven't dealt with yet, and instead of talking to you about it, right, coming to you, which would be the ideal situation, you would want your spouse to come to you and talk about it, right? Instead of doing that, they start spending the time that they would have spent with you elsewhere, on their phone all the time, or watching television, or going out with friends, or, spend hours and hours and hours at their work that they don't really need to be doing so, and they start avoiding you. How would that make you feel? I mean, it's the same way with God. When we turn to other things instead of to him, it makes him feel bad. I mean, come on, he wants a relationship with us. He wants to spend time with us. And he knows that us turning to these other things to find happiness, or to find an escape, or to just numb whatever pain it is, he knows that that is not going to be good for us in the long run. He knows that's not going to help us in the long run, because those things cannot fix our problems, right? And he wants us to turn to him, right? Throughout the Bible, when it talks about idols, if you actually look up the definition of the word idol in the concordance, in the dictionary that goes along with the Bible, when it talks about idols, it references things like trouble, vanity, so uselessness, right? Wickedness, things that are good for nothing, have no value, a likeness or an image, right? They also reference heathen gods, which is usually what idols were referencing in the Old Testament. It was like a pagan image, right? Fright or terror, a pang of body or mind, grievous, sorrow, wicked. These are all things that were mixed in with the definitions for idol. Now, if you think about that, us turning to these things, whether it's an addiction you turn to, like drugs or pornography or things like that, those can be idols, right? An addiction, a sex addiction, or turning to, another person to try and fulfill those emotional needs, or to fix the gap that is made by you not dealing with your stuff, When we turn to those things, right, it ends up being vanity, right? It ends up being fairly useless, because another person cannot fix the issues that we have, right? Another person cannot fix your insecurities. Another person should not be held responsible for doing so either, because they are simply not capable of it, right? Another person cannot fix all the things that you're stressed out about. Another person cannot fix, the issues that you have that lead to you being really tricky about money, and being really afraid of not having enough, or, a scarcity mindset, whatever it is you're dealing with. Another person cannot fix that. A game cannot fix that. Entertainment cannot fix that, right? Money can't fix that. And we know this deep down. We know that these things can't fix it, right? But we turn to them anyway. We turn to them because it provides an escape, a numbness for a few hours, or some sort of sense of control, right? Because let's face it, when you're stressed out, if you want to feel better about yourself, you try to feel in control of something, right? If you can't control this situation, how many of us divert our control to something else we know we can control to try and make ourselves feel better, right? Now, all of these things, right, all of these issues can be avoided if we just go to God. If we just go talk to Him and deal with what needs to be dealt with. But we don't do that, right? A lot of the times. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's easier to just divert ourselves to the idols, right? And because an idol's function, basically, is an escape from your stress or daily life. It provides a sense of safety or security, a false sense of safety or security, like having enough money in your bank account can provide you with a sense of security, right? Of course, that money could be gone the next day, like these are safety and security we should be finding in God, but we tend to find it in idols, right? We try to provide happiness and fulfillment through the idols, right? Like a spouse trying to find happiness and fulfillment by going and cheating on their spouse, right? That's why God puts idolatry on the level of adultery, right? Multiple times throughout the Bible. Because it's basically us cheating on Him, right? Trying to find our happiness elsewhere instead of just dealing with the issues at hand. Like I said before, the feeling of control, which then leads to a false sense of safety and security and making you feel better about yourself. So like doing these things and promoting a certain self-image online, right? Makes you feel better. It makes you feel like you have more self-worth if people are, envious of the fact that you have this house or you have this job or, you have this perfect family online, or in person. People do this in person too, right? Promoting a false self-image to make themselves feel better, right? And we turn to these things instead of God because ultimately we know that when we turn to God, God is not in the business of just giving us an escape, right? He is not in the business of slapping a Band-Aid on it and calling it a day. He's not going to, put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, right? He's going to go in there, identify what's wrong, right? Then he's going to dig up the root of it or pull that bullet out, go in there and get it. And the process of that can be painful, right? The process of dealing with, well, why am I so focused on my career? It's because I feel financially insecure and I want to feel secure and I want to feel in control and I want that because this happened here. And it hurt me and I don't know how to deal with that, right? God will dig all the way to the roots of why it is we're turning to these idols. And He will dig all the way down and get every last bit of it out. He digs them out, right? Gets rid of them. And that's a painful process sometimes. So we try to avoid it by just not dealing with it, right? But the thing is, when He digs those things out, when He gets rid of the root of the problem, right? That root of that problem might be some issue you had when you were young. The root of that problem might be looking inwards at yourself with a sense of pride or something else you've got going on that's causing the issue that you're having with that person that you think is all their fault, right? Like, He will go and He will dig out whatever the root of that issue is and deal with it with you. And then once it's gone, He plants new things in its place, good things, right? But it's a tough process to walk through, which is why we avoid it, right? We don't like feeling vulnerable. As human beings, we don't like feeling vulnerable. And when you go to God to do this process, you have to be vulnerable, right? In order to heal from whatever it is that's causing you stress, you have to be vulnerable with God and talk to Him and be like, hey, I'm feeling this way. I might not know why I'm feeling this way, but I am feeling this way. And God will walk you through the process, right? But it requires being humble. It requires seeking his help, right? Asking for help, which can be hard for a lot of people to do, to ask someone for help, right? Now, when it comes to idols, they don't usually ask us to change, right? Books, movies, television, some idea of a perfect marriage or a perfect life, a job, they don't usually ask you to change on a deep level, but God does, especially when we're dealing with stuff that needs to be dealt with, right? If he's rooting out idols and issues that are, directly related to them, he will ask us to change, right? To change our habits, to change what we consume, to change how we treat a certain person, or to change our thought patterns, right? Like, there are things in the process that we have to do, but if you go to an idol, idols just don't ask you to change, usually. Unless it's a spouse who's getting a little irritated with you, they might ask you to change, but if it's not a person, they're usually not going to ask you to change. Let's see. We also turn to idols instead of God because we feel uncomfortable talking to God. And when we're stressed out, we're more likely to want to zone out, right, than to actually deal with the issues. We want to escape our thoughts, traumas, whatever else, instead of dealing with them. As a random personal example, I have shared this, I think, before, back when I first got out of college, right, and I was looking for a job. For me, the idea of a job, like a specific career, in my head, I was slipping above my place of God, like where God's supposed to be in my heart. And for me, it was this thing where I was like, okay, when I have the job, then I'll be able to do this, I'll be able to buy that, and I'll be happy, right? One way you know if something's becoming an idol, if I have this, then I will be happy, right? That's a way to know. But I was putting this idea of like the perfect job and then having financial stability as an idol in my life without really fully realizing it, right? And God took me through some hard lessons with that. Like, he had me get denied for the job that I actually really wanted. I did end up getting it later, but he had them reject me, right? And I was like, God, I thought, like, this seemed like the perfect place. It seemed like you wanted me here. Why did they reject me? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And immediately inside my brain, he was like, you've put this as an idol above me. You can't do that. Like, I was putting the idea of financial security ahead of God. I was looking to this job to provide for me. I was looking to this job to be like a financial protection. And that was due to some other issues that I had going on, right? But I was looking to this job almost as, a place of God. Like, oh, this thing is going to provide for me. This is going to make me happy. This is going to, make sure X, Y, and Z happens. This is going to, like, I was putting it kind of as an end-all be-all. And God is the only one who wants to fulfill that spot for us, right? Like, he doesn't mind us having jobs and having careers, right? He provides them for us, but he doesn't want us to idolize them above him, right? He doesn't want that to be in the place of him, because ultimately a job cannot, fulfill the place of God in your heart. It can try, but it's not going to do it, right? When it comes to that, like, he wants to be number one, right? He is the only one who can fulfill us. He is the only one who can ultimately make us happy, right? Having a relationship with God, there is a God-sized hole inside of us, and we can try and stuff it with all of this other stuff. but it's never going to be filled until we turn to God and have Him fill it. And this is, I think, the root of a lot of our idolatry, modern day idolatry, really. You know, most of us are not going around relying on pagan images and things. If you're a Christian, you know, other religions have their own thing, but for us, it tends to be things that are, you know, not exactly pagan statues, but things like your phone, or, you know, an idea of perfectionism, or the idea of financial security through a job or career, or having the perfect family, the perfect kids, the perfect house. You know, these things, we look for security, we look for comfort, we look for love, we look for acceptance in all of these things, and we're not going to get it from all these things. We get it from God. And He wants us to go to Him. He wants us to take the steps of, hey, oh, I noticed that I have been really focused on this particular thing lately. This thing might be an idol. Let me go talk to God and figure out why I'm turning to this when I'm stressed out. Figure out why I'm spending so much time watching TikTok, or why I'm spending so much time, you know, at my job, why that I don't necessarily need to be spending there. Why am I spending so much time filling my schedule with all of these things to cram it full so I don't have time to sit alone with my own thoughts? You know, we take these things to Him, and then He will walk us through the process of healing from them. And being on the other side of that is incredibly freeing, like knowing the why you're doing something and then being able to actually deal with the why, so then you don't have the symptoms of, you know, all the things. It's like digging the bullet out, so then you don't have to deal with the symptoms of the bleeding and infection and whatever else. You know, actually going in and digging it out and getting rid of it so you can heal properly is the best thing for us. And God is the only one who can walk us through that, and He wants to walk us through that, right? Like, He wants to be there for us. He wants us to turn to Him in the same way that you want your spouse to come to you when they're feeling bad. You want your spouse to trust in you, right? You want your spouse to love you. You want your spouse to spend time with you and not avoid you and go spend time elsewhere or doing other things or trying to find their happiness somewhere else, right? God wants that beautiful relationship with us, and I think it's so much better in our lives when we actually deliberately, right, seek out that relationship with Him. Now this ties into my low tech update. Okay, for those of you who didn't watch the other video, for the month of March, I was not watching television and minimizing my use of technology like my phone and stuff like that. So far, what is it? We're almost 2 weeks in now. I figured I was going to do an update earlier this past week, but I didn't. So we are about 2 weeks in, and I have not watched any television. Like, getting rid of the television hasn't really been an issue for me. I have spent more time on my phone than I meant to. Like, I was trying to limit myself to like 10 minutes a day. And I've spent a bit more than that without necessarily meaning to. But God kind of prompted me to do this low-tech March because I had gotten into the habit, right, of spending a few hours before bed watching a movie or watching a television show or, you know, scrolling on my phone. And I noticed that this habit was becoming an issue for me. Like, I noticed that I'm spending an excessive amount of time doing this. Like, why am I turning to this? There's something here, right? And so going to God and being like, okay, God, why am I doing it? Why am I turning to this idol instead of to you? I know it's not a good thing to do so, right? And He's been walking me through that. I was stressed out about certain different things, and so being stressed out about those things instead of sitting down with Him, right, and dealing with the issues and like walking through what I needed to walk through, I was avoiding doing it, right? By consuming television and internet scrolling and YouTube videos and all of that stuff to distract myself, right? As an escape. And actually taking television out of the equation and taking, you know, most of my phone usage out of the equation has been good for me, right? Because I've taken the time to sit down with God and be like, okay, God, here I've been stressed about this. I need to, you know, we'll go through it, dig through it, and realizing, oh, the real solution to this is to trust you on this issue. The real solution is to just seek you daily on this issue and spend time in your word. And to, you know, have that relationship with you. Honestly, I think like 90% of our problems, as a conservative number, right? 90% of our issues would not be so problematic if we immediately took them to God, right? Instead of waiting around, avoiding the issue, getting distracted by other things, turning to idols, you know, and then eventually getting around to it. I mean, most of our issues would be solved if we just immediately were like, okay, God, oh, this is stressing me out. Let's talk about it. Okay, God, oh, this is making me mad. Let's talk about it. You know, if we just directly took the communication to him, I think it'd be a lot better. But that being said, I'm still going to continue, you know, not having television and minimizing my phone usage for the rest of the month to see how it goes. Spending a lot more time doing other things, like actually productive things and fun things, which is good. And more time with God, right? Which is the important thing. I think that's about it for this video. If you guys have any comments, go ahead and leave them below. I'll check them out and respond to what I can. See you guys next time.